First, we need to get a bowl full of ice and a little bit of water and place our blocks face down into the wet ice to cool them for trimming and cutting. Whilst we are waiting for our blocks to cool down, we need to check the temperature of our water bath. It needs to be between 47 and 49 degrees. This is about 5 to 10 degrees below the melting point of the paraffin wax. If it's too hot, the sections will melt when they hit the water. If it's cold, they will fold and have creases in them. Our tissues have now been embedded into a solid block of paraffin wax. We are now ready to cut thin sections in microtomy. Now, before we actually start touching anything on our microtome, we must make sure that we perform some safety checks. The first one is to ensure that the hand wheel is locked. We need to develop safe habits in microtomy. As beginners, it's a good idea to check the hand wheel 3 times. It's handy to say it in your head or out loud, check, 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 to make sure that you're forming a good habit. The next step is to check that the knife guard is covering the knife. Once you have done this, make sure that your teacher checks that nothing else is loose. Any loose parts could cause a problem for your samples and for your safety. Before we can begin to cut sections, first we need to trim the block. We need to trim the excess wax off that is between us and the tissue. We need to trim until the full face of the tissue is exposed. We trim on 20 micron. Now we're ready to begin trimming. We need to adjust the thickness indicator to read 20. We also need to check the angle of the blade. The angle reading should read 7. Check that the hand wheel is locked and the knife guard is on. Remove the block from the ice. Pull the lever forward and insert the block into the block holding clamp. Remove the knife guard, exposing the knife. Unlock the hand wheel and slowly lower the block, looking over the top so that you do not hit the blade. If the block is out too far, you need to use the coarse wheel to move it back so that it misses the blade. Slowly lower the block and watch to see if there's any wax appearing at the base of the block. You will see white if the blade is touching the block. If so, widen the coarse wheel back a little bit so that the block misses the blade. Once you have done this, you can begin to turn the hand wheel rapidly, removing some of the wax from the front. Once you've removed some, lock the hand wheel and check to make sure that it's locked. Replace the knife guard and again check the hand wheel's locked just to be sure. Remove the block and reflect it in the light to make sure that you are getting the full face of the block. If you aren't, check the hand wheel's locked and the knife guard is on and place the block back into the block holder. Once again, very slowly lower the block. You may have to move the coarse feed wheel back a little bit again. Blocks swell as they heat up. Again, cut some wax from the front of the block. After you have cut a little way, lock the hand wheel, check that it's locked, replace the blade guard and remove the block. Reflect it in the light again to make sure that you have the full face of the tissue. If so, check the hand wheel's locked and the knife guard is on Replace the block into the block holding clamp and adjust the section thickness to 5 micrometers. We're now ready to polish the block. Trimming at a thickness of 20 can damage the tissue. Polishing removes any damaged tissue from the outside surface of the block. Once you start to get some wax appearing when polishing, wind the hand wheel 5 to 10 more times. Then lock the hand wheel, check that it's locked, and cover the knife guard again. The surface of the block should be shiny. The block needs to now be placed into ice. Make sure it's completely covered. And it needs to remain like this for at least 10 minutes. 20 minutes is preferable. In the meantime, you can label your slides. They should be labelled with the sample number, the patient's last name, and your initials. Now we begin cutting. The first step is to make sure that your microtomy is nice and clean. You may use a thick brush to clean the front plate, but you must not touch the blade. If you touch the blade with the brush, the blade will be damaged. Even really thin brushes damage the blade. Make sure that you don't touch it. Sections will become split and scratched if the blade has been damaged. The next step is to make sure your water bath is nice and clean. We will often see floaters or excess pieces of tissue that are left over from other blocks floating on top of the water bath. These can be removed by getting some lint-free tissue, placing it into the water and dragging it across the surface of the water bath. You may have to do this more than once. Alternately, some labs use recycled telephone books. They're quite effective. After the specimen has been on ice 10 to 20 minutes, replace the block into the microtome. Unlock the hand wheel, uncover the knife guard, and very, very carefully make sure that the first time you move the block down, that it doesn't hit the blade. You've just got the sample cold. You do not want to cut the front cold surface off. Turn the hand wheel at a consistent speed until you begin to cut sections off. Slow down a little bit, but maintain consistency. If the sections appear to have tissue missing or crumbling in the center, it means that they are not cold enough and need to be returned to ice. Make sure that you don't continue to cut sections. If the first couple of sections are no good, the next 50 will be exactly the same, if not worse. Continue to cut some sections until you have a ribbon of 5 to 10. Lock the hand wheel and really make sure that it is locked. Replace the knife guard, check the hand wheel's locked, and replace the block back into ice, just in case you want to take more sections later. Using a dissecting probe, you can move the ribbon of sections out so it's easier to take hold of and away from the blade. Picking up the sections, move them over and lay them onto the water bath. They should be nice and flat, free from wrinkles and bubbles. Lower the slide into the water bath and slowly bring it up and slightly forward. If the section does not go onto the slide correctly, you can lower it back down very slowly onto the water bath and pick it up again. Notice the angle that I'm using. Try not to take ribbons that are too long. Sometimes they will break and drop onto the water bath and be destroyed. Get some practice first before you lay out too many. You can use a dissecting probe to help you pick up sections that are connected together. If you rest your wrist on the edge of the water bath and carefully hold one corner of the sections, you can use the glass slide to come up behind the sections and cut between them by simply raising the slide. All of these moves must be done quite slowly and carefully. You can use the dissecting probe to move sections around the water bath to get them into a more comfortable position for easy pickup. Notice how we're using the edge of the slide to cut between the two sections. After you've finished microtomy, you need to make sure that your microtome is clean. The teacher will remove the blade for you so that you can clean your microtome safely. Using a thick brush, make sure all the wax is removed. The block holder can be removed and the wax cleaned out from behind it. The side plates can also be removed. You can clean under them. Return the knife block to the microtome. Ensure that everything is locked and cover it up. Make sure you have cleaned all the rest of your waste and disposed of it appropriately. Returned all your tools.